Alright, so this is going to be part 3 to what if Asta was born with anti-magic. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness. Cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness. That I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so I know in the series I haven't made too much of a difference between the anime and this what if, but there's a reason for that, and that is when Asta gets his grimoire, he doesn't really have any spells. So I wanted him to be somewhat similar to the anime because of that fact. So in this one we're actually going to give him a lot more abilities, because between the kind of village, him saving the village, and the dungeon arc, I believe there's about like a week in between. So in this time he's actually going to be training with Noelle, and he actually develops a few different spells in this scenario. So the first thing that he learns is more of a technique and not really a spell. And I was coming up with this idea for some time, and this is the idea or a technique called overclocking. Basically what he does is that Asta uses his own natural anti-magic and basically overclocks his sword by putting a lot into it, and this causes it to have a overabundance of anti-magic within the sword, and then he could do more powerful things with his spells. So with the first spell, obviously would be Black Divider, I believe it was called. Basically this is one of the spells that he gets actually in the series, where he makes his normal dull kind of broad, not broad, but that kind of giant sword he has, his first sword, it makes it where it becomes longer, or not physically, but the anti-magic becomes part of the blade and it becomes longer and sharper. That's the entire kind of thing about it. So he has this spell at this point, and he also gets another one, and this is basically with him having overclock. What he would do is that he would just slam the ground with the flat side of his blade, and this causes like a kind of shockwave into the ground, and it erupts with anti-magic. So he kind of puts the anti-magic into the ground and it erupts on the other side, and this would mess up a lot of people's footing, as well as cancel any spells that gets hit by the anti-magic. So that's one of the spells that he'd get, at least with his swords right now, which is only one. He also gets a better control of his black form, as well as having kind of an anti-magic zone, and not really anti-magic skin just yet. So I remember in the manga that there was a point where he had something similar to Mana Zone, but it was like an anti-version of it, but I don't remember what it was called. But I remember it was during the kind of I believe it was with the devil, the fight with the devil, but I don't remember. So if anyone knows, you can tell me down in the comments below. So yeah, anyways, so we get back into the story. It would have been the day of when Yami asked both Asta, Noelle, as well as Luck to go to the dungeon, because it was a special request from the Wizard King. They have to go do it, and they ask Finral to basically teleport them there, and he teleports them to as close as he can. So yeah, they want to go on this mission because they don't want to get the diamond. I believe it was the Diamond Kingdom. They don't want them to steal what was inside of this dungeon, because dungeons contain various amounts of loot, as well as very powerful items that could be used to unlock greater potential in people. So that's a big kind of thing. So they go inside, and Luck eventually finds a way through because of his high level of mana sensing. They find themselves in a room where everything's kind of all over the place. the entire room is kind of upside down. There's waterfalls going the opposite direction, and it's just a weird place. Eventually, Luck starts using his mana sensing, and he activates a few traps on Asta as a joke. Asta obviously just nullifies them with his sword, and they start continuing through the dungeon. Eventually, this is the part where Luck would just kind of ditch them to find someone who is strong, which he would have found using his mana sensing. So he would have found I believe it was the general of one of the generals of the Diamond Kingdom, one of the 8 shining generals. So this would have been the Smoke General, but we'll get onto that later on. So eventually it would just be Asta, Noel, as well as Nero, who would be basically guiding them through the kind of dungeon. They would get to the point where there would be this giant kind of not Venus flytrap, but this kind of plant trap that would get Noel. Asta, because he has more ranged attacks, or at least has more range with his sword of Black Divider, he would have been able to defeat this kind of plant monster a lot easier than he would be in the manga, causing Yuno not to step in, but he would have still met Yuno down there. So this is the part where Yuno and Asta meet for the first time after a while. He tells Yuno that he actually got some spells. Yuno was not really impressed and says, "You only have 2 spells? And you want to be the Wizard King? I don't think that's gonna happen." And Asta be like, "Well, it'll only take 2 spells to beat you." And they kind of bicker back and forth. And this is where Klaus basically asks, "Do you know this person?" And he says, "Yes, this is Asta. We went to the same orphanage together." That's what he tells him. And this is where Klaus doesn't really care. He doesn't want him to really associate with the Black Bulls. And he tells Asta, like, why are the Black Bulls here? It would have been just fine to have the Golden Dawn here. And he tells Klaus, well, this was a special request from the Wizard King. And Klaus basically just says, well, I'm not sure what he was thinking. I mean, sending in the worst Magic Knight squad. And Asta says, well, we already got 2 golden stars. It'll only take a while for us to catch up to you. And Klaus basically says, really, with just, you have like negative 30 stars, there's no way you're gonna catch up. And they kind of bicker back and forth, and this is where Mimosa and Noel basically meet up again, because if you don't know, they're cousins. So they just kind of catch up, and Mimosa says a few things that sound like they're kind of jabbed at Noel, but they weren't really meant to, if that makes sense. So after that, they decide, or Klaus and Asta decide to basically have a race to see who gets there first. And just uses his magic to lift them up and take them away. So Asta and Noel are kind of stuck by themselves with only Nero as a guide. They guide the way through the dungeon, and they decide that it'd be better to get Luck. So that's what they do. They go and get Luck because they don't know what's happening to him, and they know that he's like somewhere in the dungeon. So when they get there, Luck is really struggling with the Smoke Mage. So what happens is that basically Asta intervenes, and with the Smoke Mage, it's kind of hard to hit him with anything that is on the ground because he always floats because of the smoke. So what Asta does is that he overclocks his sword to give it a bit more anti-magic, and he does a black tornado using his, I guess he wouldn't need his black form just yet, so he would have done this to get the smoke out of the way, which would really damage the Smoke Mage because he uses that as to make him go faster and to blind everyone. With that out of the way, Luck is a lot, he's a lot clearer, so he has a better chance of getting the Mage. Luck is very hesitant to really fight with Asta because he has that kind of mental trauma about, or mental block you could say, with his mother telling him to fight to become stronger, and he really wants to impress her even though she is dead. So he has that kind of mental scar you could say. So this is the point where he actually does land a hit on the smoke mage. Because of the smoke not being there, he can't move faster. Asta comes in after him and hits him with the flat side of the sword, slamming him into the ground. So they leave and they basically go for the kind of loot, or they go through the dungeon to meet up with the Golden Dawn to find the kind of treasure room you could say. So eventually they will get there, but when they get there they see that Mars, well, they don't know who Mars is, but one of the generals are fighting both Yuno and Klaus. Klaus is nearly down while Mimosa is out of the fight. So Asta comes in and slices a few of the crystal kind of mages, well, not mages, clones, and it would have done this pretty easily because he nullifies it, and this is where Mars comes out to kind of fight. So Mars would have done summoning a bunch of crystals, spikes from the ground, and Asta would have got stabbed on the side, just as he would have normally would be. But after that, it wouldn't really hit him after that, because he would be more prepared, and he just slices through each of the cones, and this is where the kind of giant suit of crystal that Mars makes comes into play, and he would go to fight Asta, and as he's like throwing daggers at Asta, he's just cutting them, or basically hitting them with his sword, and it's knocking them out of the way and nullifying their effects. But as he gets closer to Mars, this is where Mars hits the ground and actually makes a shockwave to kind of offset Asta's balance, and this actually does hurt Asta a bit, but Asta would recover, and he would have to use his black form in this one instance. And this is where he basically does that speech about shattering the diamond, or being the pebble that shatters the diamond, and he just flies, hits him with the sword, and this is where he just cracks through the crystals and actually hits Mars on the other side. So this is his kind of, Asta only has one use of his black form at this point, because it's still in its like early stages of it, because if you don't remember, it took a long time for him to be able to use it 2 times a day. So at this point he only can use it once. So he used it in this point, and Mars is basically knocked out. Klaus uses his binding spell to bind Mars, and he realizes why Yuno really did respect this kid, or Asta in general, because he doesn't give up, as well as his magic. He thought that he thought it was strange that Asta had this magic, because it seems like it's very powerful, and that someone like a royal, or not a royal, but someone that is of nobility should have had it, but Asta does. So he would have let Asta open the kind of entryway to the treasure room using his sword to nullify the kind of door. So that's what he would do, and this is where he basically slices through the door and it just disappears, causing it to just be an open kind of room. What they see in there is a bunch of gold and different trinkets and magical items that they haven't seen before. Yuno, as he does in the anime, finds the wind spirits, and Asta is basically just looking around at the different stuff, and Mimosa gets her new kind of cape thing, and she is fully healed at this point. So they're just kind of looking around, and this is where Mars gets back up, and they see that he has some flame around him, and it turns out that he has two types of magic. The first one being crystal, and the other one being, fire magic. And what he has around him is some sort of fire recovery spell, and he uses this sneak attack to crystallize people around him, that being Klaus, Luck, as well as and he actually attacks Noelle, which causes her to be it's a pretty bad injury, almost fatal, or pretty much fatal at this point. It's just that Mimosa is there to kind of go over the healer, but she's running out of magic because she had to heal herself earlier. So what happens is that Asta goes to fight him again, and it doesn't really work because Asta's a little bit more fatigued, and he's more fatigued because he used this black form, which does cause a lot of stress or strain on the body, at least on the early stages of the form. So after that, Mars just smacks him, and it lands him, or makes him go through a wall, and this is where he finds his other sword. I believe it was the Demon Dweller sword or the Demon Slayer sword. I forgot what it was called, but yeah, basically it's a smaller one that uses other people's magic to slash people. So he gets the other sword, and he takes it because Nero's on top of it, as well as it's seeming like he could sense the anti-magic within it, basically. So he takes it and he goes to fight against Mars. So at this point, Mars is going to try to kill Noelle because he sees his long lost friend. I believe her name was Fauna. But anyways, he sees her and Noelle, and he wants to attack it. Asta comes out with the sword, and he's a bit faster because the sword's a lot lighter than his giant kind of sword. So he goes to fight Mars, and Mars uses the same daggers as he did before, but because Asta's sword is not as wide, it's harder to basically knock him out of the way. So Asta gets stabbed a few times on the side, and he gets only a few times stabbed on the side, like slices, but he's able to counter most of them. This is where Noelle basically tells Asta not to die and to beat him. This charges up the sword, which actually gives him, like, if you don't know, the sword's able to use other people's magic and use it against others. So that's what it does. It uses Noelle's water to take out the flame recovery magic that's on Mars. And so Mars is kind of out of it. So what Asta does is that he overclocks the sword, and he actually just throws the anti-magic, anti-magic slices, and this cuts the armor and hits Mars. So he gets that spell, I forgot what it was called, but it was like those darkness slashes that Asta gets in the manga. This is a new spell, but it's also enhanced using overclock. So after that, this is where Yuno and the rest would break out, and they would basically gather everyone up. But by the time they're gonna get Mars as well, this is where the dungeon starts collapsing, and they need to escape, and they don't have time to get Mars. So they do that, and by the time they're out, Asta is basically knocked out because of the strain on his body, and Klaus basically apologizes to both Yuno and Asta, even though Asta can't really hear it. And yeah, so this is gonna be in the video. If you liked it, please give it a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And if you made it to the end of the video, please comment down CS so I know you support the channel and I know that you made it to the end of the video. If you want to see these videos early, or these videos early in general, you can join my Patreon, where I do a couple different things, like I'm gonna switch it to a monthly raffle, so we have 2 people, maybe 3, have a chance of getting a drawing for me. Right now I'm doing one for the Pirate King. So yeah, If you want to join the Patreon, it'll be in the link in the description. So let's give a shout out to the patrons. So in our gold tier we have Lyco. In our that's our first one in the golden tier. The second one in our golden tier is the Pirate King, and in our platinum tier we have PandaMan 8. So if you want to join them, they'll be in the link in the description, where you could pledge only $1 a day, where you get videos early and so many things more. So with that being said, this is gonna be the end of the video. So yeah.